Welcome to our program. We're on location today in downtown Wolfboro at Anderson Hall. And we're here to talk to a most extraordinary young musician, Kimball Gallagher. Kimball, let us talk about how you came to be a musician. Meantime, let me say that this is Kimball's 21st consecutive stay in Wolfboro. I think it's time our audience got to know you, don't you think so?
Absolutely, yeah. It's the 21st consecutive year. I've been coming since I was 11.
It's a wonderful place, isn't it?
It is fantastic. I hope to keep coming for another 21 years.
I hope so. I hope you will. And we'll welcome you back.
Thank you.
Let's begin with my question.
Sure.
How did you start to become a musician? Did this start from childhood?
Well, believe it or not, my father was my first piano teacher at the age of 5.
Sometimes that doesn't work.
It was quite a contentious scenario for quite a while, but the practicing, the discipline aspect ended up being a good thing. When I was 10, I finally put up enough resistance, and my father sort of gave up trying to teach me at that point. But then within about a year after that, I started coming to the piano on my own.
On your own.
And we had this, a friend of our family who had been friends with my parents since the early 70s, who visited once a year. His name's Joseph Smith. He lives in New York, he's a pianist. And he heard me sort of tinkering around on the piano on my own and said, you know, maybe you should put together some kind of your own performance of some kind. And we were thinking at that point that it would be a good idea to have it in our living room and maybe invite 10 or 15 people over, something like that. This is when I was 14 at the time, and I think we anticipated it would take me about a year to prepare a recital. And then somewhere in the middle of this process, this preparation, which I was doing mostly on my own, by the way, and occasionally playing.
Composing?
No, not so much. The focus was on, I did compose a little bit, but most of the focus was on standard piano, classical repertoire, Chopin. Actually, one of the things that brought me back to the piano was discovering Chopin. When I was younger, between the ages of 5 and 10, and even up till 11 and 12, I was focused on music like Bach and Mozart and Haydn. And I hadn't really gotten into the romantic composers quite yet. Anyway, during this preparation for this recital that Joe had tried to encourage me to do, I forget who it was, but someone got the idea that maybe we should have it at the local piano store. This is just outside of Boston, in Newton, Massachusetts. So they called the piano store and found out, indeed, they have recitals, and started inviting people and found a date. And it ended up being 60 people.
Oh, wonderful.
And the thing that made this kind of maybe unexpected is that I think I had 1 or 2 other performances ever in my life. You know, most students who are pretty serious about music, they either have one steady teacher who teaches a lot of other piano students, and then they kind of bring the students together to have recitals, or you go to some, you know, outside of Boston, you might go to the New England Conservatory pre-college, where I did end up going later. But you know, the really serious students in music will find some music school, and then there's an entire environment and infrastructure. I really didn't have that. It was just my parents. My father does listen to classical music all the time, so that was kind of always going. Anyway, so this concert when I was 15 was like this sort of a defining moment. So that was the first of, I did another recital the following year, and then another one the year after that. I ended up applying to Rice University in Houston to study music. I wanted to get away from the Northeast. I actually started off with music and computer science, and then quickly got weeded out of the computer science program. Actually, I had experience where I guess it was too much of this motion, but I actually got a bad case of tendonitis my first year of school, so I kind of had to reevaluate the way I was playing, the way I was sitting, everything.
Your fingers, yes.
So I studied at Rice for 4 years. It was wonderful. And then I ended up going to the Juilliard School in New York for graduate school. And that's sort of the beginning in a nutshell.
Right. Now you're on tour. Well, you had, then Carnegie Hall came.
Well, there's a few notable things happened after that. The first thing that happened was right when I graduated, I didn't have a piano. So I try to buy a piano. And then I was asking around and trying to figure out a way I could get a piano. And someone gave me the idea, actually a man in Houston who I met at Rice named Jacob Deegan. I was speaking with him, and he suggested, well, why don't you divide the cost by 88, because there's 88 keys on the piano, and ask for donations on a key-by-key basis.
Okay.
So this became a whole sort of adventure unto itself. I discovered a piano store in New York, Faust Harrison Pianos, and one of the owners at the time, Michael Harrison, he sort of oriented me around the store. He got very interested in this idea of doing a fundraising concert for the piano. I don't know if they had done things quite like that before, so they were interested to try this sort of a new thing. I found a piano that I wanted to buy. It was an Estonia piano. Estonia used to be the official piano of the Soviet Union, and then they started exporting them about maybe 10 or 15 years ago now. So that was that component. And then I had a wonderful fundraising mentor named Judy Cantor. She used to be a development person at the Boston Symphony Orchestra. I met her in the summer of 2004 when I was at the Tanglewood Music Center. And she introduced me to ideas like stewardship and cultivating relationships with donors and potential donors and things like that.
All this is entrepreneurial, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I had pledge cards, so I had if you wanted to buy a key, you could check the box, one key, but then if you wanted $250 for one key. Okay. So I had, and two keys was the trill. And then I had other musical terms like major third and perfect fifth, octave, glissando club, and crescendo club. So these were increasing amounts.
Yep.
And I had just sort of pieced together a list of many people I had met over the years at music festivals, and I basically would just call them and ask for advice on, this is what I'm trying to do. Do you think this is a good idea? What else could I do to make this more effective? So I invited everyone to this concert, and the first concert of this fundraising sort of drive, I raised about half the money, which was about $12,000 at that point.
Wow.
And then the following year, we found another space I could have a concert at. A man who ended up being the biggest donor to the whole piano. He hosted a second concert, and then some very exciting things happened towards the end of the fundraising. On two occasions, I met someone, and they asked me sort of what I was doing, and I told them I was raising money to try to buy my first piano, and we were about 3/4 of the way there. And on one occasion, a woman said, "Hold on for 1 second." Runs upstairs, comes back, check for $1,000. Just 10 minutes, just like
Wonderful.
that. And then another occasion, I was at a country club about to play a concert in Florida, of all places, and we ran into a man at the bar just before dinner and started talking to him. It turned out he was on the board of Juilliard, which we were very surprised by because we were in Florida at the time and weren't expecting to see too many people like that. And within a few minutes of conversation, he pledged that he would also make a donation.
Wonderful.
So that was my first sort of entrepreneurial adventure.
I'll
and that was
say.
a few years before the Carnegie Hall concert.
And how long did it take you? Was that a couple of years?
The whole process from beginning to end, I would say, was about a year and a half.
Year and a half, isn't that
Something
wonderful?
around that, maybe 2 years.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Then Carnegie Hall.
And then in 2008, in March, I found another very generous man named William Schwartz, and he had made it, I think for a few times during those years, he had found pianists that he wanted to sponsor their Carnegie Hall debut. So this was something he had done a number of times. And so I was lucky enough to meet him, and this was all through a class. I don't know if you're familiar with David Duvall. He's wrote many books about Vladimir Horowitz, the pianist, and another wonderful book called The Art of the Piano, which is an encyclopedia of pianists and composers for the piano. And he's written many other books. He was on the radio in New York for years, and he still is on the radio all the time. He has a class at Juilliard in the evenings, and basically the class is pianists come in, they play for the people in the class, but a lot of those people in the class, they love classical music, and a lot of them turn out to be donors, and they can help the pianists out in one way or another. So it's a wonderful environment. Yeah. And I've played in that class for about the past, I don't go nearly as often as I used to, but I've played in that class for about 10 years. since I was at school at Juilliard, which
So you
started
had
in
a lot
2002.
of concert playing before Carnegie Hall. You were giving recitals.
Oh, definitely, to some extent. Yep,
Yeah.
yep. Not a huge number, but some.
Right,
And
and maybe small concert halls, but
Yeah.
still. Yeah. So then Carnegie Hall came.
then Carnegie Hall, and
I understand it was sold out.
it was sold. It was sold out. You kind of make sure that it's sold out. You know what I mean?
Okay,
So,
that's part of it.
Absolutely. And it was the
Okay.
small hall. There's 3 halls at Carnegie Hall, so this is
Okay.
the smaller one. It's called Weil Recital Hall.
Okay.
289 seats. I could be getting that number wrong. I'm not sure the
Okay.
exact number. And then after that, or around that time, the same man who gave me the idea for the fundraiser, Jacob Deegan, he was also the first person whose home I played a concert in.
Okay.
And he had this notion, which to me was very new at the time, that you know, there was sort of an idea with musicians that you would play in a concert in somebody's home in preparation for the real concert, which would be happening later at a public venue. And Jacob's notion was kind of, you know, the home concert is the real concert. And not only is it real, but maybe it has things to offer that a public, larger venue doesn't, namely close contact with friends, more intimate environment, intimate atmosphere, closer to the piano. You can sort of engage with the artist directly. When you're on a stage, there's kind of this wall.
Yeah.
And a lot of classical music for the piano and chamber music and art song was actually written for private homes and conceived to be performed in smaller spaces,
And I
not
think
in a larger space.
It was
Yeah.
said that it was a salon.
Sure,
called a
salon style
perform-
culture. Yeah, salon culture,
Does this go
salon style
back in
concert.
history too, with pianists?
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, like I said,
Traveling and to different cities and small towns and
Sure.
playing in homes?
sure, absolutely. And I think, well, like I said, a lot of the music was conceived for small venues. I mean, certain obvious examples from a historical perspective would be like Mozart piano sonatas. They were actually written for amateur pianists to be performed in the home. They weren't even necessarily conceived to be concert pieces, most of them. And the same might have been true for some of Beethoven's sonatas and things like that. Composer like Chopin, he did play concerts in public venues, but he was known to prefer smaller, more intimate venues. And of course, in the 1820s and 30s and 40s, is the whole Parisian salon culture of
Okay.
artists gathering in one place to share ideas, and of course that would include musicians and other artists as well.
And contact, personal contact
Yeah.
and enjoyment
Absolutely.
for the whole evening, yeah.
So Jacob inspired me to look at homes in a very different way. And in classical music, you know, when I was at Juilliard and now, in 2002, 3, and 4, it was still kind of, entrepreneurship wasn't presented in music schools as nowadays. There's entrepreneurship departments in most music schools are cropping up to some extent, or many more entrepreneurship classes, and the schools have kind of recognized these are important skills that artists need to know. But back in 2002, it wasn't really like that, and there was still sort of this notion, which there still exists now, that classical music is dying, the artists are dwindling. Excuse me, not the artists. The artists are exploding.
Artists are flourishing, but they're
and
looking
the audience is dwindling, is what I meant to say.
Sure.
And that because of this, that the number of opportunities are going down.
Less, yeah.
But that mentality, that way of looking at it, excuse me, I realized it sort of presupposes that artists cannot generate their own opportunities, and that the only opportunities that exist are the ones that are sort of already set up. But what it doesn't include is the possibility that there's a possibly infinite number of opportunities that haven't been realized or noticed. And to me, just one of them, this is just the tip of the iceberg, would be private homes. How many homes are there on the planet that, I mean, and I'm a pianist, so I'm limited to homes that have a piano, and
Right.
even more so maybe limited to homes that have a reasonably good quality piano. But how many homes have a reasonably good quality piano where there could be concerts and there are not currently concerts? And I've found that number is there's a lot. And so from that point in 2001, when I played that concert at Jacob's home, I'd walk into a house and I'd sort of assess it for its concert readiness. And, you know, I'd ask the person
Its
who's...
instrument.
you'd check it out and like, oh, well, we could put the piano here. If we moved the piano here, we could seat the people here. That would work great. And then, so I decided, after Carnegie Hall, I wanted to explore this more deeply. And I had already been playing concerts in homes for a couple of years at that point. I mean, it was 2001, I played the first one. 2008 was the Carnegie Hall debut. So I decided to package it together in what I call now the 88 Concert Tour. And this, for me, was an exploration of Salon, the possibilities of Salon-style concerts in homes. So originally the plan was to really focus on the United States and just see, is this a viable thing? Did I just sort of get lucky a few times? You know, is this something, or is there really an appetite for this? And then I was looking for ways to do special things in the concert. So I would always have the question and answer with the audience. I would always sort of try to start conversations during the concert, give some little bit of background information on the piece, a few things to listen for. I'd always try to personalize the choice of repertoire. So if it was at your home and your favorite composer is Beethoven, then I'll be sure to have at least one Beethoven piece on the concert, and we can kind of pick that together. If the host happens to play piano, we might play a four-hand piece on the concert. If their house was built in a specific year that lines up with, you know, if the house was built in 1820, find a piece that was written in 1820, little things like that.
Yeah.
And then I started also composing a piece for the host that would be actually based on their name. And this is a tradition, I don't know how far back, I'm sure it goes before Bach, but I know Bach did it many times where he would spell his name out in musical notes, those 4 notes, and use those notes to generate the piece. So they'd be sort of the seed or the motif or the motive that would generate an entire piece of music. And so if it's 2 people, then you use 2 names, and it's nice because if they're a couple, you can kind of see how the names mingle together in a musical fashion. If it's a family, you can include. There's no limit, of course, to what you can do with these pieces. So I started. So there'll be 88 what I call preludes, personalized preludes, by the time the tour is over as well.
In 2013, did you
Probably
say?
be 2014.
2014.
The other element here is that I started with this home concert concept, but
Right.
then around the 17th concert of the tour, I was invited to Kabul, Afghanistan, at this new music school there called the Afghanistan National Institute of Music.
Wow.
And that's sort of a whole sort of world of things unto itself. But
I would imagine.
to put it briefly for now, in the context of the 88 concert tour, it sort of woke me up to this idea, you know, why am I limiting myself only to the United States? Why not make this an international tour? And then my sort of vision for the tour expanded. I also realized a lot of places you could do salon-style concerts. It wouldn't have to be a home, and there's a lot of places in the world where it's very difficult to find homes where there are pianos in them. And
Right.
if there's a good piano right down the street and there's people who want to come, you know, why not try to, you know, produce that same environment there? So, I don't know. But since then, I've decided I want to go to all 7 continents, including Antarctica.
You
And
like travel,
I do like travel.
obviously.
I like the adventure of trying
You
to figure out
travel
how to.
alone, you said.
I generally travel alone, but you know, when I arrive in a place, there's a lot of activity going on generally.
People, contacts that have been made.
Absolutely, contacts
Yeah,
that have
word
made,
of mouth
other
and-
musicians, people who might be potential hosts.
And he said you don't have an agent.
I do not have an agent. This is all. This is all
is
on.
real
There's a
entrepreneurship.
lot of goodwill behind
Yeah,
everything I do.
apparently.
It would not happen without.
Yeah.
You know, I can't just set up a concert in, say, Thailand by myself, but in the case of Thailand, I had met these eye doctors in Eugene, Oregon, when I donated a concert to the Eugene, Oregon Symphony, and they introduced me to another man in Thailand named Jumpot, and he was involved in what's called the Siam Society, and he arranged for a concert, and that ended up being the sort of the focal point of this Asia tour that I did in April of last year. So I knew the Thailand concert was set up, and I said, well, if I'm going to Thailand, I asked their permission, and I said, would you mind if I presented this to people as if you're sort of the sponsor of the Asia tour? They said, sure, no problem. So then because of that, I was able to say, I'm going to be in Asia. Can we do a concert in Shanghai? Can we do a concert in Taiwan, Vietnam? And so I ended up being in Mongolia as well, actually, on that particular tour.
Wonderful.
So that's sort of like how the tours are developed.
Yeah.
And this opened me up to all these possibilities of international travel and also of humanitarian things. So there's
Efforts,
a lot of, each country almost has sort of a story behind it.
Yeah,
I
I'm
was
sure.
in Tunisia and Egypt post-revolution, and I have a concert tour coming up this fall in India where I'll be promoting a variety of environmental organizations that are committed to legitimizing trash pickers in India, which is a very big issue there.
Yeah.
So each one of those is sort of like a world unto itself.
Right.
And so I don't know what I'm going to do after the 88 concert tour, but for now, this is the focus. And I'm in the about 54 concerts. The 88th concert will be at Carnegie Hall again in March of 14.
Tell the viewers a little more about Kabul.
Sure.
You not only perform, but you spend some time there and work with the musicians.
Absolutely. The school, before 2001, when the Taliban was in power in all of Afghanistan, there was no music. It was actually, music was not legal in Afghanistan. And I believe that, I know someone whose father was there when the Taliban had systematically actually destroyed a lot of the instruments, if not all. I think they were intending to destroy all, and musicians, I've heard stories, they try to hide them or bury them or protect them in some way. But anyway, most of the musicians left, as far as I know. Anyway, I don't know too much about that, but a man named Ahmed Sarmast, who was actually the only Afghan to ever get a doctorate in music, decided that he wanted to rebuild the infrastructure, the musical infrastructure of Afghanistan. And in, I think it was 2009, I believe that's correct, he was looking for funding for this idea of having a music school in Kabul. And he was actually at an airport coming back from trying to get some funding, and he ran into some people at the airport, got into a conversation with them about the school, and they suggested that he write a proposal for them. And it turned out they were from the World Bank, and a few weeks after that meeting, they pledged $2 million to start the school.
Wonderful?
And then a lot of other international support started to flow in for the school. Most notably, the German embassy donated about 5 tons of orchestral instruments. So the school is committed to creating the first orchestra in the history of Afghanistan. And they also, as well as Western music, they teach Afghan music, and they want to preserve the music by creating method books for some of the instruments, because a lot of Afghan musical traditions, and this is not an area where I'm an expert by any stretch, I don't really know that much, but a lot of the musical traditions were simply passed down, like, oh, let me show you how to play this kind of thing. They weren't written. But that also makes it possible for them to go extinct a lot more easily.
That's
so
right.
there's an effort, a conscious effort at the school, I
write
know, to not only write it down and create method books about this is how you learn this instrument. So then at least it'll be something that we can
Be passed down
exactly.
to future generations.
And they teach Indian music. Half the students are are either orphaned or they live on the streets, and the school actually pays the families $30 a month, which is what the child would be earning on the street if they were selling chewing gum on the street, for example.
Right.
So it's for a lot of these kids, it's very